All right, let's get into this. We're going to unpack a pretty wild scenario, a fictional future conflict from 2026, all based on how it's detailed in its own, well, pretty extensive Wikipedia article.
So, right out of the gate, the story hits you with the one event that lights the fuse for everything that follows: the assassination of Iran's supreme leader. This just immediately cranks the stakes up to 11.
But here's the thing, an event like that, it doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? The real question the whole article gets into is this: how did all this tension that's been simmering for decades finally boil over and drag the whole world into it? So to really get it, you've got to rewind the clock. I mean, way back. The seeds for this 2026 war were actually planted over 70 years ago. And when you look at the timeline, you can really see how this thing just built and built over decades. It starts all the way back in 1953 with the coup. Then you have the huge shift of the '79 revolution, the tensions of the Iran-Iraq war, and then, it gets more direct with the assassination of Soleimani. And that 12-day war in 2025, it was basically a dress rehearsal for the main event. And this is really the core of the whole problem, isn't it? You have two completely opposite stories. Iran says, hey, our program is for energy, and they even point to a religious ruling against nuclear weapons. But on the other side, the US and Israel are convinced it's all just a cover. And, of course, the article notes the irony that Israel is widely assumed to have its own secret nuclear arsenal. The weeks right before the war were just an absolute powder keg. I mean, it's this incredible chaotic mix. You've got huge protests inside Iran being violently put down. The US is moving massive amounts of military gear into the area. And at the exact same time, they're trying one last time to negotiate a nuclear deal. It's just a recipe for disaster. And then it happens. The powder keg finally explodes, kicking off this massive military blitz. Okay, so the first 24 hours are just insane. It's a lightning-fast chain of events. The U.S. president gives the green light for Operation Epic Fury. Then come the surprise airstrikes, and get this, they happen while those nuclear talks are supposedly going on. The supreme leader is killed, and Iran doesn't wait. They hit back within hours. And the scale of this initial attack, it's just staggering. The source says Israel alone reportedly used over 1,200 bombs in the first day. Just think about that. What is that? That's like 50 bombs an hour, every hour, for 24 hours straight.
And they weren't just dropping them anywhere. The claim was 500 different military targets spread out across Iran. This was called the largest single combat mission in Israelis' history. The whole idea was to just overwhelm and cripple Iran's military in one single massive blow.
But Iran's response, Operation True Promise IV, was just as swift, and it was broad. They didn't just fire back at Israel. No, they went after U.S. bases and allies all across the Middle East. And just like that, this goes from a one-on-one fight to a full-blown regional war, practically overnight. The fighting wasn't just on the ground or in the air. A huge part of this was the information war. Just look at these numbers. They're all over the place. The U.S. and Israel are claiming over 6,000 enemy soldiers killed. Iran's health ministry says over 2,000 of their civilians are dead. And then the NGOs have totally different numbers. It just goes to show how impossible it was to get the real story of the human cost. And the shockwaves from this didn't stop at the battlefield. Not even close. The war almost immediately tipped the entire world into a crisis, especially the economy. And to get why the economy took such a hit, you have to look at this one little sliver of water, the Strait of Hormuz. It sounds small, but it's basically the planet's oil pipeline. About a fifth of all the world's oil has to pass through there. So one of the first strategic moves Iran makes is to choke off that artery. They seize control of the strait, and boom, suddenly a huge chunk of the world's oil supply just stops. And you can see the result right here. I mean, look at that jump. In just 1 week, oil skyrockets from $82 a barrel to $114. We're talking a price spike that hadn't been seen since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The financial damage to the region was just astronomical. A UN estimate claimed that in just 1 month, the war had already torched over $120 billion from the economies of neighboring Arab countries. That's billion with a B. So after more than a month of this absolute chaos, diplomats finally managed to press pause. They brokered a ceasefire, but it was a really fragile temporary one, only set for 2 weeks. But even with the fighting stopped, this quote from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is, well,
It's chilling. You can't make a revolution from the air. It makes you wonder, right? It sounds like the airstrikes were just phase one, and it really calls into question what the actual end goal was.
And that's really the big question this whole thing leaves you with. This wasn't just some regional squabble. In only 39 days, it completely scrambled the global chessboard, wrecked economies, and left the future totally up in the air. What on earth comes next? Well, that's the scary part. Nobody knows.